cloud. Good morning, Boker Tov, everybody. So nice to see you. Today, instead of doing the usual Torah portion, we're going to do the upcoming, and hopefully it'll turn into a holiday, the concept of Tisha B'Av, which means the 9th day of Av, which is not this Sunday. A week from Sunday is the 9th of Av, the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. It is a day that many tragedies happened to the Jewish people. And one of them we discussed a few weeks ago. The spies came back from the land of Israel and they spoke, "We'll never be able to conquer the land. It's a land of giants. It's overwhelming. We're like grasshoppers." And that was the first tragedy that happened on the 9th of Av. And if you recall the commentary, Rashi says, or one of the commentaries, God says to the Jewish people, "You're crying about the fact that you can't enter into the land of Israel? You think you can't conquer the land? I'm going to give you something to cry about." And as we see in the future generations, the first Beis Hamikdash temple was destroyed on Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av. The second Beit Hamikdash was destroyed on the exact same day, the 9th day of Av. The battle of Beitar was lost. The Jews were banished from Spain. The Jews were expelled from England. Both world wars, World War I and World War II, began on Tisha B'Av. And the Romans plowed the Beit HaMikdash, and many other things over the history, but these are the most famous. These 7 things are most famous. I wanted to share with you happened on Tisha B'Av. So since the beginning of our history in the desert, Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, has become a day of sadness, of mourning, of things that are not positive. But guess what? When Mashiach comes, Tisha B'Av is going to become one of the greatest holidays. So we have a lot to look forward to. So I want to discuss a few things today. First of all, do Jews believe in grief and mourning and crying? We're always about serve God with joy, happiness, celebration. Why, after so many thousands of years, are we still having a day of worldwide mourning? We sit on low stools. We don't eat. We fast for 24 hours, just like Yom Kippur. We don't wear leather shoes. We don't learn Torah because Torah gives joy. Tisha B'Av is a day of tremendous grief and sorrow. So why, if our way in life is always serve God with joy, celebrate, laugh, happiness? So Chassidus says something very interesting. Depression is not a sin, but what depression can do to you can bring you to sin. No sin can do. So we're not talking that Tisha B'Av is a day of depression or you should be put into a depression. Rather, we're talking about the fact that grief is not depression. Mourning is not depression. As a matter of fact, grief is positive if it spurs you to action. So many times you see and read stories of people never had a terrible tragedy. They lost a young child. They lost a beloved in a very unusual, tragic way. And they built a library in memory of the person. They built a mikvah in memory of the person. They set up a fund in memory of the person. So if grief brings you to positive action, it's positive. And it's healthy to mourn and grieve, but not depression. So by mourning for Tisha B'Av, the intent is not to make us depressed and fall into a slump of inaction, of inability to move forward, but rather grieve and mourn in a way to understand what is it that we need to do. How can we change the tide of Tisha B'Av? How can we reverse a day of grief, a day of mourning, to a day of happiness, celebration, and joy. So I want to talk a little bit about this. And I want to also analyze a little bit, what is Tisha B'Av? I remember when I was a young girl, I used to say, why are we still fasting? Is it fear? Thousands of years ago, the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed and all the other things. But when I matured and I started to study, I got a little bit more of an insight. We're not only mourning and grieving the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, number one, the second Beis HaMikdash, and all the other tragedies that befell our people and our world. The crack has not been repaired. As long as the crack is there in the universe, you know, a crack in a windshield, if you don't repair it, what happens? It gets bigger, 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 bigger. If the crack in the universe is not repaired, if the world is not brought back to the way it was meant to be, we're mourning, we're grieving for the now and the here and the now. It's not only grief and despair about what happened thousands of years ago. It's about how our world has still not been repaired. So we're fasting and we're remembering the first and second Beis HaMikdash and all the tragedies that befell the Jewish people and the world, but we're also fasting and praying that the world become better and better and better. So it's not only what happened, it's what's happening in the present. It's what's happening in the present. Does anybody want to add anything as we move along into Tisha B'Av? You can unmute yourself. We're a small crowd. You can unmute yourself so we could hear people's comments if you want to. So, like I said, so Tisha B'Av is next, a week from Sunday. And now we're already in the 3 weeks that began with the 17th day of Tammuz, when the Romans breached the walls of Jerusalem. The siege began in Tevet, the 10th day of Tevet. They put a siege around Jerusalem. On the 17th day of Tammuz, they breached the wall. And on Tisha B'Av, they actually burned and destroyed the Beit HaMikdash. So that's why these 3 weeks, from when they breached the walls till the destruction, are days of mourning. And the 9 days beginning with this Friday, which is Rosh Chodesh, it is the 9 days of mourning that leads up to Tisha B'Av. So what do you do on Tisha B'Av? On Saturday night, the fast begins 18 minutes before sunset. You fast till Tisha B'Av nightfall, till it's dark, 3 stars. What do? You don't eat, you don't drink, you don't have intimacy, you don't bathe, you don't anoint, and you don't listen to music. Of course, you don't take haircuts, and you listen to the lamentations being read Saturday night in the synagogue, or you read them at home. It's called Eicha, Lamentations. And Sunday morning, you don't put on tefillin because it is a day of mourning till the afternoon prayers. And you don't study Torah on Tisha B'Av till the afternoon, because again, Torah, the study of Torah brings joy. You read the books of Lamentations and you read the prayers associated with the destruction and the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, so that's just some of the customs and traditions associated with the 9 days leading to Tisha B'Av. People don't do laundry these weeks. You don't get married. You don't have celebrations. You don't listen to music. You don't go to theater, movies. These 9 days, beginning with Friday till next Sunday, a week from Sunday, are days of mourning, days of mourning. And hopefully they won't be this year. Hopefully they'll be, Mashiach will come already. So we discussed what happened on the 9th of Av, why it's a day of mourning. Now, let's go a little bit into understanding what's going on with Tisha B'Av, what's going on in our world, what's going on in general perspective on the whole concept of Tisha B'Av. So Napoleon was taking a walk with an entourage in France, and they passed a shtibel. A shtibel is a little shul, a little synagogue. and they heard cries, moans and cries and wailing. So Napoleon says to one of his aides, go in and tell me what's going on over there. He comes back out. He says, the Jews are crying and mourning the destruction of their temple, their Beit HaMikdash. So Napoleon says, really? I didn't hear of any disasters, recent disasters. So the aide says, no, General, this happened thousands of years ago. So Napoleon says like this, a people that can mourn their temple for thousands of years will be a people that will celebrate the rebuilding of that very temple. In other words, a nation that could still cry and mourn something that happened thousands before they were even born will be a nation that will be witness the rebuilding and the celebration of that very temple. Interesting insight from Napoleon. And those that, it says, those that mourn for Jerusalem will merit the rebuilding of Jerusalem, rebuilding of the temple. So what exactly is going on? What is going on is like this. An interesting insight based on the Talmud and based on the Torah passages. There's an interesting law in the Torah that if you want to demolish a synagogue, you want to break down a shul, it's illegal. You're not permitted to destroy a shul or a synagogue unless you're going to rebuild a new structure in that very place. So you can't just demolish a synagogue to put up condominiums. You have to rebuild a shul in that place. So let's say you want to remodel your synagogue, you want to refurbish the synagogue, you want to modernize it, you want to make it safer, like they should have done with the condominiums. You are permitted to demolish a synagogue, provided you rebuild the synagogue. So God destroyed the first Beis HaMikdash. Then they rebuilt a second Beis HaMikdash in the same place. But how was God permitted to destroy the second Beis HaMikdash? There's no Beis HaMikdash now. How was the destruction of the temples permitted? It says in the Code of Jewish Law, you can't destroy without rebuilding. So Kabbalah says that God is going to bring, that is the proof that there's going to be a third Beit HaMikdash. And the Zohar, which is the Kabbalah, the Book of Splendor, says something fascinating. That on the Shabbat, the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, which is next Saturday, it is called Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbos of vision. Why is it called the Shabbos of vision? Because I want to read. The Shabbos, that is the Shabbos that the prophet Yeshayahu, Isaiah, said that if you don't repent, he tells the Jewish people, if you don't change your path, there will be the destruction of Jerusalem, destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. So that Shabbos, we read about the vision, the prophecy of Isaiah, Yeshayahu, the prophet. Comes Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev, based on Jewish mysticism, Hasidus, and says, that's not only why it's called the Shabbos of vision. It's called the Shabbos of vision because if you have the power and the potential, you can see on that Shabbos the vision of the third Beit HaMikdash up in the heavens, waiting to come down here like a UFO, like a giant spaceship. Says the Zohar that the third Beis HaMikdash is different than the other two. How? The first two were built by man, right? God gave them instructions. God told them what material. They went out, they got woodcutters and stonemasons and experts in building, and they built the first Beis HaMikdash and they built the second Beis HaMikdash. But the third Beis HaMikdash, says the Kabbalah, will be built, was built by the divine, and it's going to come down like one unit, like a prefab, right down from the heavens and be put back where it belongs. Says Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev, yes, Shabbos Chazon was a vision of destruction because of but the sins of the Jewish people, but it is also the vision of what's to come, the rebuilding of the third temple up in the heavens. There's a song, way up high in the sky, there's a building still not finished. It's a children's song that we sing with our campers. It is the third Beit HaMikdash ready to come down like a giant edifice as soon as we merit the coming of Mashiach. So it's really not a contradiction. What happened was originally it's a vision of destruction. But Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev says on this Shabbos, there's a vision of rebuilding, a revision of rebuilding. So now you see what Jewish mysticism gives us. Always the optimistic, upbeat perspective in life. Yes, it's a Shabbos, but we read about the vision of destruction, the prophecy of destruction, but we read about the prophecy of the rebuilding as well. There's always a counterbalance to that, which is so, so beautiful, which is so, so beautiful to hear. So now I'd like to hear from you. Tell me what you think about this idea and Tisha B'Av. What does Tisha B'Av mean to you? When you were growing up, or you weren't growing up, or you experienced it, how do you envision Tisha B'Av? Anybody want to say anything? Unmute yourself. I can't hear you. Can you unmute?
No, I wasn't aware of all that. Mitch even says he wasn't aware growing up of Tisha B'Av. I always get it mixed up with the name Tu B'Shvat, even though it means totally different.
Right, it sounds alike. Yeah. Well, because Tu means the 15th day. Tisha means the 9th day. The 9th day of Av, and that's the 15th day of Shvat. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, it is the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. Coming back to the Napoleon story, is that if you know how to mourn for your people, you'll know how to rejoice with your people. You cannot only be a leader in fine times, in rich time. You have to be with your people, with your brethren, with your brothers and sisters when they grieve and when they celebrate. That's true unity, Jewish unity. You cannot be what they call a friend only in the great time, but as soon as someone falls into despair, I'm not your friend anymore. You fell on hard times. I don't hang out with losers. No. The strength of the Jewish people is that we stick together on Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av, we fast together, we daven together, we cry together, and then we go and we celebrate together. And that's the real true unity. That's real true unity. So now going back, I want to finish up the concept of what's going on. So there's an interesting passage in the Talmud, which is very cryptic. It tells the story that right before the destruction of the first temple, a Jewish man, has his cow with a yoke plowing the field. And an Arab, says the Talmud, comes by, an Arab who happens to understand the language of animals, and the cow goes, moo! And the Arab looks at the Jew and says, unyoke your cow, the destruction of the temple is near. Then the Talmud continues that the cow goes moo again. And the Arab man who understands the language of the animals says to the Jew, put the yoke back on the cow. The Mashiach has been born on this very day. Now, this is a very strange and cryptic Talmud. Why even put it in? It's so weird. It's such a story. What does it even mean? Well, it means like this, that in the very same day that God destroys our Beis HaMikdash, God already plants the seed of the Mashiach. The son, the boy, the child is conceived on Tisha B'Av. The future Redeemer is born on the very day of destruction. This is what the Arab was telling the Jew. First, he says to him, on Yom, this is destruction. And the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. But on this very day that there was destruction was also the conception, the seed of the child was planted to be born, the future redeemer of the people of Israel, Mashiach. And this is very foreign to us Jews because we always look at Messiah as a Christian idea, a foreign idea, a ludicrous idea. Tell me honestly, who here believes in the word Messiah? I say Messiah, everyone's going to run for the hills. She's crazy. It's a Christian concept. Jews don't believe in the second coming or the third coming or the fourth coming. That's not us. But the concept of the Mashiach is based in the Torah. Maimonides says, I await the Mashiach every single day. Ani ma'amin be'emunah shalema b'vias HaMashiach. I believe in the coming of the Mashiach. God tells us. Now, it's not going to be a man in a spacesuit floating down on wires on a UFO. Mashiach will be the future leader of the Jewish people, like the Moses of our generation. So if you can look at it in those human terms, that Mashiach is similar to what the Jews felt in Egypt. 210 years they're slaves, and then Moshe appears. A guy, Moses, who are you? The son of Pharaoh, the prince of Egypt. You're taking us out of slavery. What are you, crazy? You think you can get us out of here? If you could think in those terms in modern day times, we could understand what Mashiach is. It's going to be the Moses of our generation. But like I always tell people, don't worry who the Mashiach is. Let's worry how to do good things to bring Mashiach. Our job is not to uncover the mystery of who the man is. Our job is to do everything possible to make the world roll out the red carpet, so to speak, for the Mashiach. Do every act of goodness, kindness, mitzvah. Make the world a place ready for the third Beit HaMikdash, ready for the coming of Mashiach, so to speak. So Tisha B'Av, yeah, go ahead.
Mitch was asking, is the Mashiach just for the Jewish people or for every person on the earth?
A very good question. It's interesting that the whole world will benefit from Mashiach. Why? Because the world will become a place of no illness, no war, no despair, no poverty. It will be the Garden of Eden. A whole world will be Israel, perfection, peace, love, unity, serving one God, no disunity among the world. So really, the story is that everyone should be working for Mashiach, non-Jews and Jews, because it's the benefit of everybody. Everyone will benefit from a better world. My brother lectures a lot. So how does he teach about Mashiach? He doesn't even use the word. He just says, don't you want the world to reach a better place? So if you could take that word out, if you're uncomfortable with it, and just say, let's make the world a better place, it's more palatable for people. But Tisha B'Av draws attention to this because Tisha B'Av is when Mashiach was conceived. And it says, before God puts any illness into the world, he already has given us the remedy for that illness. Now let's go back a little bit to the story with the Talmud, with the cow and the moo. It also draws attention to something very interesting, I think, is that with destruction comes innovation. With destruction comes reparation. Sometimes you need destruction to be able to rebuild. The foundation is rotted away. The condominium building has collapsed. Sometimes you cannot fix. You have to destroy to rebuild. Sometimes it's not fixable.
Well,
Sometimes,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, that's the case with planned forest fires. They destroy it so that the undergrowth the trees can come back, right?
Exactly. Sometimes it is precisely the destruction that brings the reconstruction. You know, like when they break the bone to fix the bone. There's so many instant examples. For example, you remember the story with the sticky notes? It was a chemist working in his lab for years to create a powerful glue, and he failed. What did he create? A glue, like my Baba would say, nishtahina nishtaher. It's too weak to be a glue. And it's not really, it's a glue, but not a glue. It was a glue that only stuck a little bit, but it wasn't a glue that you could really glue something. So everyone said it's a failed experiment. And he said, no, a Post-it note. You want to be able to remove it, but you also need it to stick a little bit. So one-time use, an inventor of the sticky note. So sometimes what we think is a failed experiment, a destruction, it didn't work, it's over, gone, demolished, is really an opportunity for rebuilding and regrowth. This is what the Torah is telling us, what the story in the Talmud. Moo, moo, take off the yoke, there's going to be a destruction. Put back the yoke. The Mashiach was conceived on this very day. Sometimes, let's take it personal in our marriages and our relationships. Sometimes a wake-up call is the eroding of the relationship. I'm leaving you. It's over. We have nothing more in common. The honeymoon is over. It's gone. It's done. Sometimes that's the wake-up call to tell us that it's all over. You better do something about it right now. Until the crack breaks the glass and the glass shatters, sometimes you don't want to do anything. It'll be fine. We'll put a little Scotch tape. We'll put a little duct tape. It'll be okay. A little crazy glue. But sometimes until something is totally destroyed, you're not ready to pick yourself up and make the change necessary to reconstruct, to rebuild. So I think to sum up this concept is in the same Shabbos that we see the destruction and we read about the destruction in the Haftorah, it is the same Shabbos that if we are lucky and we merit, we can look up and see the third temple ready to come down as soon as the world is ready to accept it. The world is ready to accept it. That's this concept. There's always the counterbalance in Judaism. There's destruction at times. It had to be a destruction. But there also, God says, yes, remember though, we're going to rebuild. There's always the rebuilding with the destruction. So now I want to move on to another very, very fascinating thing that I read about in Tisha B'Av, which I think is so phenomenal. When the Romans came into the temple, they plundered, they pillaged, they burnt, they robbed, and no one was permitted into the holies of holies. What was in the holies of holies? Anybody remember? What did God place in the holies of holies, which is the inner chamber of the Beit HaMikdash? There were 3 chambers, like 3 sections: the outer chamber, the inner chamber, and the innermost chamber called the holies of holies. No one was permitted in there, only the high priest on Yom Kippur. No one was permitted into that room ever. So in the holies of holies was the ark, the golden ark, remember? That had, what was in the ark? The new 10 commandments and the broken 10 commandments, which we discussed why the broken ones are there, because that defined our relationship with God. That even when we think we're broken, we're really not. It shows the true love of the marriage, the true love of the relationship. Now, 22 years before the destruction of the first temple, King Hosea took the ark and he hid it, and no one knows about this. He hid the ark in the subterranean secret chamber of the Beis Hamikdash. Did you know that when they built the Beis Hamikdash, there was a secret chamber underneath, a subterranean chamber? And he hid the ark there because he had a prophecy there will be a destruction. So he hid the ark. So when the Romans, and then later, no, when the Babylonians, and later the Romans, the Babylonians destroyed the first Beis Hamikdash. Sorry about that. The Romans destroyed the second Beis Hamikdash. Came, they couldn't find the original ark. They didn't know about the subterranean chamber, the secret chamber. So what they really got was just the other vessels of the temple, but not the most important, holiest vessel. Now, on top of the ark, there was something very beautiful. Who remembers? Margaret, unmute yourself.
I forgot. I don't know.
The cherubim, the cherubim.
Right.
What were the cherubim? It was the face of a boy, a face of a little girl, sculpted out of gold,
right,
symbolizing the relationship of God, the male, the groom, with the girl, the bride. Very fascinating that when the relationship of God with the Jewish people was on a good standing, they followed the Torah and mitzvahs. They lived up to the potential and the directives of Torah and belief in God. The cherubim faced each other. Anytime there was an estrangement, they began worshiping idolatry, they became promiscuous, other sins, the cherubim turned away from each other. Now imagine you and your relationship, every time you would have the cherubim and you could check up on it. Oh, we're good today, honey. Oh, no, today we're not so good. Oh, today we're in a good standing. Today we're not. The Jewish people always had a barometer on which to see their relationship with God. Amazing. Now comes the most unbelievable part of what happened. So they come in to pillage, plunder. And what do they see? They see the cherubim facing each other. And not only facing each other, embracing each other during the destruction of the temple. And they grab the cherubim and they pull it outside to the streets of Jerusalem and they call out and they say, look what the Jewish people care about. Look how depraved they are. Look what they have as a monument in their holies of holies, a boy and a girl embracing intimacy. This is what they think about all day. They made fun of the Jewish people and they dragged it to the streets of Jerusalem. So now just want to answer in case you're wondering, didn't we just say they were the cherubim and the ark were hidden in the subterranean? So how did they see this? The answer is that when they hid it, they put a replica, like a tapestry that replicated the ark and the cherubim. They put a replica. So what they really schlepped through the streets was a replica, maybe on a tapestry, some commentaries say, but still the same idea. So now you're going to ask a very interesting question. How is it that during a moment of destruction, when God says to the Jewish people, you have sinned, you have left me, you have betrayed me, I'm destroying my temple, I'm not going to be here. How is it that we see the cherubim not only facing each other, hugging? Shouldn't they be estranged from each other, symbolic of the relationship? Isn't now the relationship broken, so to speak? God is destroying the Beis Hamikdash. This is no small fry. God could have concealed the Beis Hamikdash. God could have locked the Beis Hamikdash. God could have covered it, like in Rapunzel and all those stories where they get covered over by moss and leaves and nobody could find them. God could have done many mysterious things. So here you need Hasidus, Jewish mysticism, to explain what we mentioned before. When do we realize the power of a relationship? sometimes during the moment of destruction, when there's nothing left, the fire has burnt to the ground, you realize what you lost. You realize deep, deep inside how much you love the other person. Sometimes when they walk out on you is when you realize what you had. And that's when you feel the strength, because a person might be gone, but you feel that inner attachment, that emotional attachment. So what God showed the Jewish people, I am burning my Beis HaMikdash. That building can't stand now on a foundation of treachery, promiscuity, idolatry. But the relationship between you and me is never, never, never disconnected. We are always eternally in an embrace with God. Eternally, we are embraced and connected to God, facing each other. And that's why the Code of Jewish Law says something so fascinating, that before a husband or wife goes away on a business trip, you're going on a business trip, it's a mitzvah to have intimacy before the business trip. You're intimate with your spouse because you know you're not going to see each other for a couple of weeks or a couple of days. It's a mitzvah to be intimate before you go away on a business trip. The Code of Jewish Law, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Look how Judaism celebrates marriage and life and intimacy between husband and wife, Jewish husband and Jewish wife, with the rules of family purity. Look, this is what's going on here. God says, I'm leaving you. I'm destroying my Beis HaMikdash where my presence was most revealed, but we are intimate together. God is hugging his spouse. The facing and the hugging of the cherubim indicates that before I leave you, before I destroy my Beis HaMikdash, I am intimate with my people. I'm always going to be here with you till I return in that revealed way. This defines us that in the moment of the greatest destruction, God loves you, loves us, hugs us, embraces us, is intimate with us on a very, very deep and high level. Now you understand what God is to us. Like we said last week, God needs us. God created a relationship with us. We matter, whether we like it or not. And this also explains the subterranean tunnel, that there's two ways of looking at our relationship with God and the Beis HaMikdash. You walk into Shul, you walk into the Beis HaMikdash to bring your offering, to speak to the Kayin, whatever. Let's go back in time. And you have a beautiful, gorgeous Beis HaMikdash, and the presence of God is revealed. You see the fires, the prophecies, there's directives, there's the breastplate that lights up. It's magical. But when the physical edifice is missing, is destroyed, is gone, God is no less closer than us. God is not distant. You just don't have that, but you have the subterranean where the ark is hidden. The relationship takes on a different dimension, perhaps a hidden dimension, an abstract dimension, but no less loving and close to Almighty God. So the subterranean tunnels that are hidden till this very day, and no one is going in there till Mashiach comes, defines our relationship with God in exile. We're not really in exile. It's a darkness, but we are still connected to God, perhaps even in a more intimate way, because sometimes absence makes the heart grow fonder. You have something all the time, you can take it for granted. Not that we want the darkness, but there are benefits sometimes that come out of darkness. So this is what the Torah is showing us. At the moment of the greatest destruction, you see the greatest love. You feel the greatest love. You know the greatest love between God and the Jewish people. So now we can understand a little bit more how Tisha B'Av relates to us. Tisha B'Av perhaps is an opportunity to understand where we stand with God. That even though it seems like a distant creator, is even a creator, is God around, is God not around? God defines really everything about us, who we are, what we do, how we do it, and so on. A little lighter, a little lightness now. We have to take it down a notch. Anybody have any questions, concerns, complaints, disagreements? I can't wait to see the Beis HaMikdash, actually. They actually had movies they made depicting the Beis HaMikdash. It's funny, when I was in Israel many years ago for a bar mitzvah from somebody in our shul, we went to a museum in Jerusalem that is supposed to depict the Beis HaMikdash. So I watched the whole film, and I see the tour guide, the museum guide who's showing the video, is a religious woman. Her hair is covered. I could see she was from. So I went over to her and I said to her, how come there's no kalim in the Beit HaMikdash video? How come you're not showing where the menorah was, where the table with the loaves of bread was, where the ark was? She said, because they don't let us show it. It's too religious, she said. It's too religious. I said, oh, interesting. I said, but isn't the Beis HaMikdash then too religious? She says, no, that's not too religious. Interesting story. So where was the Beis HaMikdash built? You ever wonder why God chose that spot? Jacob, when he ran away from Esau, remember the ladder where he rested, and the ladder reached, he had the dream of the ladder from heaven to earth? That's where the Beis HaMikdash. Remember Abraham was ready to sacrifice Isaac? That was the place of the Beis HaMikdash. And then there's now a third story of why the Beis HaMikdash was built there. And we'll finish with this story. There were two brothers who lived in the land of Israel before the building of the first temple. One was a single guy, a bachelor, had a farm. He shared with his brother, a married man with a bunch of children. And they were harvesting the wheat. And they went to sleep, a very loving brotherly relationship. And the single brother says to himself, you know, my brother and I, we split everything 50-50, but it's really not fair. He has to feed 4, 5, 6 children and a wife, and he has to leave an inheritance to his children. He really should get more than my share. So he decided every night he's going to take a few bundles of his wheat that he gets from his barn, and he's going to sneak it into his brother's barn. And that's what he starts doing. It's harvest. So every night when his brother doesn't see, he goes to his barn and he starts putting some wheat into his brother's barn. So his brother has more to sell. Now let's go to the brother. The other brother is lying at night, awake, and he's thinking to himself, what's going to happen to my single brother? He has no wife. He has no children. Who's going to take care of his old age? Who's going to take care of him? I need to give him more wheat so he has a bigger 401k. He has a bigger retirement fund. So he'll have more money. He'll be able to provide for himself in his old age, because he won't have anybody to provide for him. He doesn't have children. He doesn't have a caregiver. He doesn't have a wife. So every night he started to sneak bundles of wheat from his barn during harvest time to his brother's barn. One night, the two brothers sneak out. Each one is going into the other one's barn. And guess what? They meet. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? I asked you first. Why are you holding wheat? Why are you holding wheat? So the first brother reveals his plan. I always feel bad that you have a whole family and we're splitting it 50-50. You deserve more. And the other brother says, no, but you don't have a family. Who's going to take care of you? You deserve more. And the two brothers look at each other and they embrace because the love was so great. What could you say? And God, a baskail means a voice from God came down to the heavens. This spot where they stand facing each other will be the spot where I will build my Beis HaMikdash, God says. A spot of love, compassion, caring, unity. This is where I want my Beis HaMikdash. So this is where the Beis HaMikdash is and will be forever. A place of love, a place of compassion, a place of goodness, of unity, caring, sharing. This is the spot. So what I feel from this story is we have to take this idea of love, sharing, giving, goodness, kindness, and make our spot a place that God wants to build his Beis HaMikdash. Because it says that every person is a mikdash ma'at. Each and every one of us is a tabernacle. V'asali mikdash v'shachanti b'soichem, God says to Moses, make me a tabernacle and I will dwell within them. Them, which means that not only do we have one central Beis HaMikdash, every Jew is a Beis HaMikdash, a mini. Each of us has to be a place where God wants to dwell. How do you make yourself a place where God wants to dwell? By being hospitable. Goodness, kindness, love, mitzvahs, Torah, tzedakah, and everything that elevates us, ourselves to be that type of person where God says, this is where I want to be. I want to hang out with them, with you, with her, with him. So if Tisha B'Av, we walk away with anything except oy vey, I have to fast. It's true, oy vey, I have to fast. It is oy vey. Who wants to fast? Who wants to wear, who wants to, I don't mind wearing sneakers, but who wants to fast and read Lamentations? Nobody. But what we can take out of Tisha B'Av, and it should be turned into a day of holiday, is that every one of us has the responsibility to turn the world around and do anything possible for anyone and for ourselves, Torah, mitzvahs, goodness, kindness, anything, to make the world ready that God should say, yeah, I'm going to rebuild my Beis HaMikdash right over there. So I want to wish everybody, we're going to take a little break now for the next few weeks, a little break from the class,